Hello everyone, and today we're back with another 5 quick tips to climb ranked video, and this time we're going to be talking all about Syndra. Syndra has always been a super interesting champion to watch and to play, and hopefully this guide will give you some advice that will lead you on your way to becoming a top Syndra player. So let's start off with tip number 1, Syndra's stun. Syndra's stun is one of the most punishing tools at her disposal. Landing a big stun combo can be absolutely devastating, and there are a fair few ways that you can pull it off, and also a few things that you may not be aware of that will help you land it even more consistently. So as you all know, Syndra needs to use a sphere to land her stun. You can generate spheres with your Q and your ultimate, and these are the main ways to land your combo. Don't forget that your W has a slow, so this will make it harder for your enemies to dodge your stun. Typically, most Syndra players will use their Q and then their E, and this is the most common way to do it. However, high elo players will use their E first, and just after that, they will place a max range Q inside the E to make it super difficult to react to. If this is done in melee range to an enemy, it is basically undodgeable. You can also add to this by cheekily creating a double stun. Q, then E, then Q again at max range to stun the opponent twice. You can also use your W on a nearby sphere with your E to stun your enemies. If you use your W and your Q with your E, both of your spheres will stun, which works really well against multiple targets. You can also extend the range of your W and your QE stun by using it over certain walls. This is pretty situational, but it can be a way to lock down those opponents who are looking to ward, or to create a catch opportunity and kill escaping foes. Here's a way you can see it in action during a live game. So the last thing to mention about Syndra's stun is to use it with your ultimate. Sometimes, despite your ultimate dealing a stupid amount of damage, it doesn't actually need to be its only use. When you're roaming or counter ganking or just facing more than 1 or 2 targets at a time, if you use your ultimate on the target at the front of the fight, you can follow this up with an E for a huge AoE stun on potentially an entire team. You can then follow that up with a Q and a W for huge damage contribution. So the next tip we've got at number 2 is power spikes and maximising your passive. Understanding when you're at your strongest is an absolute must when playing Syndra. She has a few major power spikes throughout the game, and learning when to abuse them will easily make the difference and help you gain leads and win games. Syndra is not actually the strongest in lane until around level 5, where she has a small boost in damage, but her level 6 ding is undeniably strong. A great way to abuse this is when you're level 5, start preparing to all in. Try and get some harass before this point so your lane opponent is at a lower health, and ideally out of potions, so that when you do have your ultimate, there is less chance that they will survive it. Syndra's ultimate deals more damage the more spheres you have on the ground nearby. When you're nearly level 6, you want to get some spheres on the ground beforehand in preparation, as this will make your ultimate deal more damage. Q, then Q again, and then W the first sphere so that its time on the ground is refreshed. Use that W or the existing spheres to land your stun as you hit level 6. Then you can press your ultimate, and just as your ultimate is flying, use another Q at the same time for an insanely strong all-in. There are plenty of variations you can actually do of this, but this is basically a near optimal way to get yourself a lead, especially if you've got Ignite. Syndra's second power spike is at level 9. The reason for this is due to Syndra's passive giving her abilities a bonus effect when they reach max level. When Syndra's Q is max rank, it deals 25% more damage. This is a huge amount of increased damage, and it's insanely strong, especially if you time it alongside an item spike. The best way to abuse this is to think about your level 9 all-in. Get yourself a base in, get some items, get back to lane, and abuse this power spike by landing those Qs and watching your enemy tilt off the face of the earth. Depending on what you max second, usually you want to go for your E as it increases the stun width, but if you do opt for Syndra's W, this will actually grant you 20% true damage upon landing this ability. Another huge power spike once this ability is maxed, and it can absolutely shred any opponent. This can actually be a really smart option when you have multiple magic damage threats on your team, as the opposition may go for earlier magic resist, which means the true damage will be even more beneficial. Okay, let's move on to tip number 3. This one is all about controlling your lane. So Syndra's lane phase is a really important part of her game, and she can easily gain leads and then snowball those leads into the rest of the game. When playing Syndra, you will typically combine both your farming and your harass in the same way, queuing those minions and aiming to queue your opponent down at the same time and getting some easy harass. When your minions are low health, your enemy's movement will be really predictable as they come to last hit. Try to time your Qs as they farm for free poke until you have a chance to all in. In trades, you want to look to add auto attacks to your Q and your W to proc your electrocute if you have it. Ideally, you want to repeat this process throughout the lane phase and whittle them down so they are either choked out of farm due to being low health, or even better, forced back or killed. If you position your ball between you and your enemy, they will simply have to respect it due to the ability to follow that into a stun. This easy way of zoning your opponent will help to deny them farm and overall keep the lane in your hands. When it comes to your stun, you'll want to be cautious when you're using it. Throwing it out often shows your enemy that you are reckless, and they can easily decide to punish you for it when it's on cooldown. If you repeatedly use it aggressively, then the enemy jungler will likely look to capitalise on this too, and bully you for it. Aside from all of that we've mentioned here, make sure that you're abusing those power spikes as we discussed earlier. This is the key way to winning those games. Tip number 4 is all about Syndra's role in teamfights. So when it comes to teamfighting on Syndra, you have various ways that you can be effective. There is the obvious one of looking for an important target to delete with your burst and combo, like an AD or an AP carry. Your Q and or your W with your E and your ultimate will most of the time have the power to kill these pretty easily. This is a pretty core way to be effective on teamfights as Syndra if there's a particular threat on the enemy team that needs to be taken care of. If this isn't the case and their gold is pretty evenly spread, there are a few different ways to play Syndra to be even more effective. Syndra's stun is absolutely devastating in teamfights and can easily be as crucial as something like an Orianna ult if you play it correctly. In areas that you are likely to start a big fight, you want to keep using your Q and leaving those spheres nearby as potential tools for your stun. Your ultimate will also deal more damage the more spheres that are on the ground, so this is a win-win overall. In prolonged fights, you will get used to using your E repeatedly, so always be conscious of laying spheres, where your spheres are, and utilising them fully every time your stun is up. You can also reposition yourself with your flash if your spheres aren't in an ideal place. Plenty of things to think about, but you can see just how important this can be. If you don't have time to plan all of this out with your spheres on the floor, quite often using your ultimate on a close target first, and then following that up with your E, is an absolutely insane way to hit the whole entire team with your stun. Not only will they all be CC'd, but it would also deal a ridiculous amount of damage, and you can follow that up with your Q and your W for even more. There is also the playstyle of making picks. Syndra can easily take an enemy champion out of the fight and swing the odds into your team's favour. If you pick the right target like a jungler, you can then force a major objective like Baron or Dragon Soul. If you pick one of their carries, you can now force a team fight when the opposition will now be 4v5. Pick yourself up an Oracle Lens, follow your support when they're gaining vision control, and look to utilise this to pick up a free kill and help your team win games. Okay guys, that's going to bring us to the last tip of the day, and yes, you guessed it, it's all about matchups. These are 3 of Syndra's most commonly faced champions, Fizz, Zed and LeBlanc. Some are easier and some are harder, but overall, here is a little bit more specific advice to help you out in those lanes. So let's start off with Fizz. It's probably one of Syndra's worst matchups. He can dodge everything with his insane mobility, and he can easily get on top of Syndra and take her out. The most important thing to think about in this matchup is the careful use of your stun. Wasting it or just missing it gifts Fizz the opportunity to all in and take you out for free. You will basically want to play the poke game against this champion. Focus on sticking super far back and landing as many Qs as you can and trading from a distance. You will not want to get close, and you will want to avoid any version of an extended trade. Even if you bully him down to a kill range, he can still dodge all of your damage and take you out easily, so continue to respect him even if you have the advantage. When you're both level 6, Fizz will probably start getting a little bit overconfident and start wanting to dive you. Consider picking up an early stopwatch and try to catch him out with the EQ stun before he has time to use his E, or save it until he's already wasted it. Do not waste your ultimate when he's got his playful trickster up, as he will simply ignore all of your damage. Your best bet in this lane is to roam and influence other lanes with your stuns and damage. Just be careful that he doesn't follow you and take you out along the way. Let's talk about Zed now. So Zed has been terrorizing mages for as long as I can remember, but experienced players shouldn't actually have too much of a problem once you get used to this lane. The most important thing is actually not dying early. If Zed gets a lead, whether it's from you or one of your teammates, he can basically snowball that lead really quickly and just start diving you repeatedly. In the early levels, you want to abuse your range advantage and try to force him back, or just try to make him play defensively due to landing a good amount of harass. You want to play around his shadow and don't let him hit you for free with his double Q or double E. When his shadow is down pre-6, he'll have no way to dodge your damage or stun, so this is a good window to punish him. When you're both level 6 onwards, this is when it can be a little bit more tricky. If Zed times it right, he can dodge most of your damage and your CC with his ultimate, so always try to save your cooldowns until he pulls the trigger. Once he's ultied, keep track of his shadow locations, scatter as many spheres as you can around them, and shut him down with a well-timed stun. If you can bait out and survive his shadows or his ultimate, you can easily win this lane and take him down. Finally, let's talk about LeBlanc. Now this is actually a really interesting champion to play against, and she can be a real threat in some lanes. As Syndra though, you have one main job to do. Use your E when she attempts to use her distortion. LeBlanc's W is actually a big part of her damage and mobility, but you can completely deny it by timing your E correctly. Aside from that, make sure you don't get hit by her tether, and if you do, push her and stun her back so that you can outrange it. LeBlanc really should not be able to win this lane if you play it well, so time your stuns effectively and take her out afterwards. Just remember not to use your ultimate on her clone or you will feel like a silly sausage. That concludes our 5 quick tips to play Syndra video. We really hope you enjoyed it. Best of luck in those fizz lanes and we'll see you all again soon. Take care.